What's going on, everybody? I'm Jory Goodman, the Time Teller. So guys, every year I try to do a little recap on the channel about the watches I've worn the most that year. Now, we're at the beginning of 2021, and looking back to 2020, 2020 was a very interesting year, and there were 3 watches that were on my wrist at all times, not at the same time, but for some reason I have the ultimate 3 watch collection that just encapsulates that year. So let's just get into it. My 3 watch collection for 2020, it is 2:20 p.m. Let's get down to business. Okie dokie, guys. So the first watch that I was wearing practically all the time in 2020 was this. My G-Shock DW6900 Neo Tokyo. Now, this watch I have yet to do a designated review for, but I have spoken in depth of my DW6600, and this is essentially the same watch. A little bit of a different interface, but pretty much the same. The DW6600 is kind of my favorite G-Shock. It's a little bit chunkier than, say, a 5600, but not as big as your Mudmasters. So it's just so intuitive how the button for the light, the backlight, is just right here. It doesn't matter how dark it is, doesn't matter what you're doing, you always know that you can just press right here and get a really nice glow on that screen. Again, you have your stopwatches, you have your splits, you have your timers, you have pretty much everything you need and nothing you don't. Now, what would make this even better? Perhaps solar power functionality would be incredible with this watch, but again, my DW6600 I stole from my dad in the mid-90s, and I've never replaced the battery on it, and it is still going strong. So these are just freaky watches. I've no idea how that is possible, but it is. So this variant or iteration of that DW6600, 6900 style is a bit more modern, but also kind of it's retro-futuristic, because again, it's kind of modeled after Akira and that whole presentation of Neo Tokyo, the night skyline, and it's just very beautiful how there's some kind of bluish purple hues in certain lights, and the resin on the case kind of sparkles a little bit, which is interesting. It's not the same kind of matte black that you get on, say, a DW6600. This is just a little tad bit different with the colors on these registers here. And then, of course, this does have a negative display, so thank God for that backlight, because in certain lights, if it's dim out, these negative displays aren't the easiest to read. But as I was saying, this watch, not as big as a Mudmaster, so it's very easy to wear every day. I'm going to put it on my wrist in a moment, and you'll see it doesn't encompass the entirety of my wrist. But while we have it in our hands here, let's go ahead and measure it. Okie dokie, let's break out the digital calipers for this digital watch. Let's see, at its widest point, it is about 48.2 millimeters across, and then we'll do the lug to lug. 53.5 millimeter lug to lug, and then we'll check the thickness here. 16.2 millimeters thick. Now, I know some of you are chuckling out there, because this truly does break all the rules for me. You hear on this channel all the time I say, oh, that 40 millimeter sweet spot, sub 40 millimeters is even better. Anything coming close to 50 millimeter lug to lug is way too big, and over a 40 millimeter diameter is just disgusting. Well, rules are meant to be broken, guys, and you're going to be seeing that a little bit more in this episode as well, because G-Shocks are just insane. Okay, the wearability is incredible. Yes, they are on the bigger side. Yes, they are so freaking cool, and yes, they are so freaking functional. And let me tell you, when I was losing track of the days and everything in 2020 due to, you know, the current events, you know, it's even still happening in 2021. Yeah, all the functionality with that calendar, it just definitely helped me out. And I took up running a lot, actually, because all the gyms have been closed. So having a simple G-Shock on your wrist with a timer, you can check your time, your split, and especially if you're doing something like interval training, it's just very helpful. So really enjoyed having this G-Shock on the wrist. And another thing, talking about being, you know, locked down, having this G-Shock where I just knew it was always running, it was something I could just slap on the wrist, and if I had to run an errand, I could quickly go do that. Yeah, just kind of a no-brainer. So this G-Shock Neo Tokyo DW6900, I absolutely love it. Let's put it on the wrist. So here it is on my 7.5-inch wrist for reference. And again, everything's so intuitive. That backlight's right there. All the different modes I know are right here. So my timers, my stopwatches, split, reset, start, stop. It's just, you know, even setting this G-Shock is just so easy. But yeah, this thing has been a lifesaver all throughout 2020 into 2021. Let's move on. Another rule breaker, man, a big old quartz watch. The Seiko Tuna SBBN 031, the quintessential Seiko Tuna, the big tuna. Absolutely love this watch. You know, I still get heat to this day for my unboxing. People are like, oh, why does he keep saying, oh my God, like, look, why is he so excited? Well, this was a grail for me, guys. This was a big grail for me. Ever since I learned about Seiko, I just always wanted a Seiko Tuna. And then, as many of you know, the entry, the gateway drug of watch collecting is often, you know, the Seiko SKX for most of us. And so when I got a Seiko SKX, that just wanted me to get the Tuna even more. It just kind of lit this fire under me. So when I was able to finally get this watch and check it off my list, it was just, you know, such a big deal. And the reason that I wore this a whole lot in 2020 is kind of the same reason I was wearing that Neo Tokyo, and it's because with this Quartz 7C46, I didn't have to wind it. I didn't have to keep it on a winder. It was just always going. This thing has a 5 to 7 year battery life, and it has an end of life designator. So it's not, you know, it's not going to tell me when I'm going to die, but it will tell me when the watch is going to die, because it will do 2 clicks every second. Or 2 ticks, however you want to say it, and that will let me know when the second hand starts acting funny, it is time to go replace the battery. But yeah, absolutely love this watch. It is pretty much what I think of in my head when I think tool watch. So, you know, G-Shocks are kind of in a separate category altogether in my head, but when I think tool watch, I think of the big Tuna, and I love that double domed Hardlex crystal and just how it just kind of a little bit sits just above that bezel and this big shroud. Let's get up close and really take a look at this thing. So again, you can see this big handset, but really that double domed crystal, it's like a bubble and all of that body armor. 4 o'clock crown. It is signed here, Prospex, but aside from that, you don't really see it on the dial at all. They didn't go overboard with the branding. You know, this is kind of the last hurrah for Seiko. They were not all into the kind of superfluous branding everywhere, everything. It was just very tasteful. Okay, Prospex logo on the crown. It's kind of it. And man, everything is just so attractive to me when it comes to this watch. You know, the pip shines like a lighthouse. The LumiBrite everywhere with these big bold indexes and that huge broad handset. It's just, yeah, very highly visible. Love the day date complication. I have it set to kanji currently. Just looks that much cooler. Kind of an industrial look, but at the same time very sleek where it has to be. And yeah, just the quintessential tool watch. Let's measure it and put it on the wrist. All right, once again, breaking out the calipers. So at its widest point, and again, there's no real crown guards. It's just the shroud and that 4 o'clock positioning that's protecting the crown. 47.5 millimeters at its widest point. Then lug to lug is 44.7 millimeters. And then the thickness, we'll exclude that strap there. 14.1 millimeters thick. Whole lot of watch. Definitely not, that 40 millimeter sweet spot I was talking about. But boy, does it wear sweet on the wrist. Let's put it on the wrist. Here it is. This watch, I think there's some deception going on. When you look at the spec sheet, I think a lot of people are scared of wearing these full-size tunas, but the truth is they wear much better than they look on paper. Okay, so sometimes you just gotta forget about the spec sheet, you gotta throw it out, and sometimes you just gotta take the plunge. And I'm telling you guys, this breaks the rules as far as, size and other metrics. When I was first interested in this watch, I didn't know about the 7C46 movement and that it was quartz. And the more research I did and the more I learned about how these Japanese saturation divers needed something more resilient than the mechanical movements they were using at the time. And then they came up with the 7C46 high torque quartz movement and everything they did to make this probably one of the most robust tool watches ever. It's just, I thought it was that much more badass and I had to have it. And so, yeah, again, it's always running. It is just something I really, really found myself relying upon in 2020. And there's some similarities between all the watches we're going to talk about today. So let's move on to the final watch that encompasses my 3-watch collection for last year. Let's do it. That's right, the very recognizable Rolex Explorer 2, reference number 16570. This is the 40 millimeter oyster case slim lug, red GMT hand. Wears exactly like an oyster case should. Let's get up close and take a look. So this is funny. This is perhaps the only outlier in a way, because obviously the first 2 watches we took a look at are battery powered. This is automatic, but I was still relying on it a whole bunch because I keep this on a winder. I know, oh my gosh, how taboo. You wouldn't leave your car running 24/7, so why do you have it? Oh, give me a break, guys. Most watchmakers also use watch winders. Isn't that crazy? Because they keep them running and then they test the watches and then, oh my gosh, well, I knew a watchmaker and he told me that if you use a watch winder, you're not gonna go to heaven. No, that's not how it works, guys. You're fine. Watches are much more resilient than you think. If your watch isn't healthy enough to be on a watch winder, then there are some other problems with that watch. It's not the watch winder, it's the watch. So let's talk about this watch. As I said, 40 millimeter oyster case, threaded crown, at least a 100 meter water resistance rating. You're getting the very Rolex Cyclops magnifier on that crystal. I love it. I know a lot of people hate it. That's perfectly fine. You can put a crystal on there without a magnifier. So you're getting that date complication, you're getting a GMT complication, and you're getting a jumping hour hand. So it's like this quick set jumping hour hand. Let me see if I can show you. So the first position, right, is actually going to allow me to jump the hour hand on the fly. So if I'm traveling and I'm changing time zones, I can just immediately flip that around however I want, and it also allows me to cycle through the date complication very, very seamlessly and effortlessly. Now, the ironic part, perhaps the cruel reality of the situation, is I haven't been doing much traveling. I don't think any of us have. But this watch definitely made me want to travel a bit more, kind of inspired me to get the heck out of here once this is all over, if this ever is all over. And the real reason that I was relying on this watch, again, is because I keep it on a winder. It's always going. It's very tough, robust, has a decent water resistance rating, and I was able to run in it. So, all these things I was doing, home workouts, running, some other hobbies that I'm going to talk about in a moment, actually, when I get all 3 watches together, you'll notice, again, think about the other two watches that I shared with you today and think of some similarities between the three of them. And yeah, let's go ahead and measure the watch, then we'll put it on the wrist. Then we'll get all three watches together and we'll talk about why this is the ultimate 3-watch collection for me in 2020 and maybe even going into 2021. Let's just measure this thing. All right, most of us already know the dimensions of this watch. Again, 40 millimeter Oyster case, but we got to confirm that with the digital calipers. So at its widest point, excluding the crown or crown guards, yeah, 40 millimeters on the button. Bada bing, bada boom. Now let's do the lug to lug. 47.4 millimeter lug to lug. Now we'll do the thickness, excluding that Cyclops. 12.2 millimeters thick. Okay, let's put it on the wrist. I mean, come on. It's perfect. Really don't have to spend much more time on this watch. It's just perfect on the wrist. It's not cumbersome, very sleek. Easily the lowest profile out of the watches we've spoken about today. Probably the most versatile out of the watches we've spoken about today. Again, drilled lugs, very easy to quick swap a strap if I have to. I tend to wear this one on the Oyster bracelet though, but this would look good on some canvas. I think it would look great on a weathered leather strap. I think it would look really, really cool on a sailcloth even, but yeah, I like keeping it sporty. And yeah, I mean, who doesn't love this watch? I think the Polar with the red is much better than the black dial version of this watch. The 42 millimeter, although I don't like that they bumped it up to 42 millimeter, I actually do really prefer the black dial version of the 216-570 because I think the orange and the black play better than the orange and the white. But that's just me, different strokes for different folks. Let's get all three watches together and we'll talk about really why I relied on all of them last year. Okay, so now we have all three of my ultimate watch collection for 2020 here together. And there are some definite similarities, okay? I think all of these could be considered tool watches, right? And it's just funny, when I was thinking back about the watches I wore and still am wearing very consistently, I was like, oh my gosh, there isn't a dress watch in sight. Why? I mean, I'm a vintage guy. I like dress watches. You'd think I'd be wearing those all the time here. And the truth is, that's just not the case. I think that I tend to wear dress watches when I'm going out, whether it be a meeting or, out to dinner or just strolling about the city. And the truth is, there has been none of that. There's been none of that, like pretty much for the past year. So yeah, I found myself not really wearing my vintage dress watches or even like my Seiko Presages. I haven't really been wearing any dress watches for the past year a whole lot, which is a big bummer because I used to, want to wear my Cartier Tank or my Reverso all the time. And now with my 1945 Vacheron, it was hardly on my wrist. And I think it was just easy to choose some really robust watches that I knew were running. It was just kind of out of convenience, but also, as I alluded to earlier in this episode, I picked up a few hobbies during this quarantine. So first up, as many of you know, I was a competitive powerlifter for like over a decade. And typically if I was in the gym, a conventional like weight room setting, I'd be wearing G-Shocks. But because I've taken up running and doing some really, out of my comfort zone types of workouts outside of a standard, gym scenario, I felt comfortable wearing watches that I normally wouldn't wear in a gym. So things like my Seiko Tuna and things like a Rolex sports watch. These were just easy to slap on the wrist and go for a run or do some interval sprints or even going to a park and doing some bodyweight workouts and stuff like that. Another hobby I picked up, interestingly enough, I was baking a lot, which it sounds like a cliche now, where I know that in 10 years we're going to be looking back on 2020 and be like, oh, people were baking bread to pass the time and doing... No, seriously, I was like making brownies and cupcakes and this and that, and oh, Connie was loving it. And yeah, when I'm doing dishes, mixing ingredients, and getting my hands wet and dirty, having watches that are very robust with decent water resistance ratings. I mean, come on, this tuna is just absolute overkill. Yeah, it was great. It was very convenient. Oh, I'd get some brownie mix on my oyster case, no problem. Just dunk that in the sink, no issue. Oh, I got some egg on my G-Shock, no problem. Throw it in the dishwasher. Like, seriously, you can do that. It's not an issue. So, yeah, and cooking. I was cooking a whole lot more. I was trying recipes I've never done. So I think during the first half of quarantine, I was ordering out like all the time in the city. Like, that's all we could do. I didn't want to go to the grocery store because it was just a madhouse, people panic buying this and that. It was just a headache. It wasn't that I was like in fear of my life. It was just that it was literally like the markets were out of food, there were lines, there was this and that. So again, out of convenience, we were just ordering in. And then the second half of quarantine up until now, it was kind of like, okay, let me throw on that apron, try some things. Ooh, I made the best pulled beef in my slow cooker. Oh, I added some hickory in there. It was perfect. I wish you guys could have it. Maybe we'll do a meetup when this is all over and I'll cook for you guys. Who knows? But yeah, doing that in the kitchen, it was very, very nice to have some watches that I did not have to worry about. And guys, these just got me through a difficult time, and that difficult time is actually still going on. So these are still getting me through it. And you know what? Now that I've made this episode, and now that I've kind of vocalized things for myself, I'm going to make it a point to throw some more of my dress watches in the mix, because I truly do love my dress watches. And hopefully in the near future, we'll be able to go out and do the things we used to do. But for now, you know, we got to work with what we got, and I'm just happy to share these with you. And yeah, I guess 2020 was the year of the tool watches, and that's, you know, making this episode actually not only for you guys. It's going to be interesting for me to kind of have this bookmark and to remember this time. So a little bit of a time capsule for me as well. So guys, please, if you enjoyed this episode, make a list of the watches that got you through 2020. Maybe it's a 1-watch collection that you just happen to wear all the time. Maybe it's a 3-watch collection or more. But these were the watches that I wore hyper consistently last year, and I'd love to hear from you. So guys, if you enjoyed this episode, click that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit the bell icon, join the channel. There's a whole bunch of really cool watch-related gear in the affiliate links in the description below. And yeah, check out my personal website, www.thetimetellershop.com. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Again, 2021 is still very difficult for a lot of people, but we will get through it just like we made it through 2020. If we were able to get through something like 2020, this will be a cakewalk. And I gotta go because I actually got a cake in the oven. So yeah, better throw one of these on. Oh man, I cleared the timer on this thing. Oh well. Love you guys. Take care. I'm Jory Goodman, the Time Teller. Always remember, I didn't invent time. I just tell it.